Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we're sort of going to be working with circular linked lists again. But what we're going to do in this video is we're going to code up a function called linked list. And it's pretty self-explanatory. All we want to do is if we give it a circular linked list as a parameter, then we want to return a true or false value of whether this linked list that we pass in is a circular linked list or not. And so what I did is I coded up a little circular linked list here. I appended 1, 2, 3, 4. And I quickly at the very top, I copied in the singly linked list code that we did from earlier in the series. And I just appended 1, 2, 3, 4 in that to a single linked list as well and printed it out. And so if we print it out, if it'll save, if we print it out, we get let's make that a little easier to read. Sorry about that. This is the first 1, 2, 3, 4, where this is a circular linked list, and this is the second 1, 2, 3, 4, where this is a singly linked list. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna print out, we're gonna pass in is circular linked list, and we're gonna pass in cll for the first time we run it, and we're gonna pass in SLL for single linked list the next time we pass it. And what we want to do is when we pass in our circular linked list, we want to return true because that is a circular linked list. And we pass in the single linked list, the single linked list, we just want to return false because that's a single linked list, that's not a circular linked list. So what we're going to do is the main difference between a circular linked list and a single linked list is that when you loop through the whole thing at the very end, in a single linked list, the last node is going to be pointing to none, whereas in a circular linked list, the last node will be pointing back to the head. And so that's what we're going to be working with. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to call make a variable of before we start. If you guys want, pause the video and try it on your own. If you guys want to try to do it on your own, but if you guys have any trouble, definitely come back and we'll work through it together. But without further ado, the first thing we want to do is we want to initialize a variable called cur, and I'm going to make that equal to the ll.head. Over here, I just passed in a parameter called ll. This is just going to be the single linked list that, or the linked list that we pass in to see if it's to return whether it's a circular linked list or not. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run cur is equal to ll.head. And what I'm going to say is I'm just going to loop through the entire list until I get to the very end. And at the very end, I'm going to check if it points to self.head or it points to none. And so what I'm going to say is while cur.next, I'm going to say cur is equal to cur.next. And then I'm going to say if cur is equal to the ll.head, I'm going to return true. If not, I'm going to return false at the end of the whole list. And so what this does is if we have a circular linked list, I'm moving, if this is my cur for my circular linked list, I'm going to move it over so that when I move my cur over once, I'm going to go from the head to the second node in the list. And then I'm going to check there if this is the head of the linked list. It isn't. So then I'm going to move over, and then now this is going to be my new cur node. This is also not the head of the list, so I'm going to move over to my next node. I'm going to move it over. This is the very last node in my circular linked list, but again, it's not the head of the list. So I'm going to move it over. But remember, in a circular linked list, the very last node points back to the head. So that means our 4 node over here, it points back to the 1 node. And so when we move from our cur to our cur.next, we're going to move from our 4 node to our 1 node, and our 1 node is our self.head. So if we get back here, if our cur is equal to the linked list dot head or the ll dot head, we're just going to return true. And if this is not the case, we're going to get to a point where once we move from our next once we move from our next node, from our last node to supposedly our next node, in our single linked list, if we're at the same position, we're going to go to none. And so then that's going to break this while loop because this is going to return false since there is not a cordon next at that position. And so since that is the case, we're just going to return false in that case because we know then that's not a circular linked list. That's some other kind of list because it points to none, not the head of the list. And so let me comment out these two print lists. I'll comment this out too. And I'll give it a second to save, clear this. If we run this, we get true and false. And so this is what we wanted. We pass in a circular linked list, and we pass in a single linked list, and we return true for our first one, and we return false for our second one. And so once again, I'm just going to do a really quick recap. What we did was if we suppose we pass in a circular linked list like we did in this first case, we stored our head node. We started looping through our node over and over. If we got back to our head node, which we would in this case, since our for node points back to the head node, which is the 1, since we loop back to our head node, this rendered true at some point, and so we just returned true. And if not, when we pass in our single linked list, when we went from our for to our supposedly next node, we actually went to none because remember in a single linked list, if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, our last node is then pointing to the none. And so since it's pointing to none, this while loop is going to fail and it's going to return false, and we're going to be done with this while loop, and in that case we just return false. And so that is how we get our true and false. That's how we return true or false for our is circular linked list function in our code. So that is the function right there. Hopefully this helps you guys, and then see you guys in the next one. All right, later.